memory decay, and haunting archives at the end of the world. Today I'm going to be talking about Queers in Love at the End of the World, but first, some contextualization. This is from a chapter of my manuscript project, No Time to Play, the mundane temporalities of video games. In that larger project, I'm interested in video game temporalities entangled with daily life. And through this, I also challenge conceptions of games as bounded objects. I draw from a history of play scholarship, video game technologists, and trans theory to account for and take very seriously games' constant movement, their perpetual becoming, and the ways that play always changes games and ourselves in turn. So I ask, what happens when, instead of holding on to games, fixing and preserving a particular version of them, we embrace the death of the game? This engages what Rayford Gwynns calls the afterlife history of games, which he describes as a recontextualized state that exists after commodification and intended use. But I extend this further. I argue that games are always already in a state of afterlife. No game survives play, and through their perpetual destruction, new ways to find meaning through play emerge. In the longer version of this chapter, I entangle a critical reanalysis of Queers in Love with other media constellated around it, including autoethnographic accounts of my time speedrunning and transitioning, engagement with trans women writers, particularly Kai Cheng Tom and Hannah Bear, media history of online Pokemon simulator developer Kathy Fitzpatrick, and some various other texts. But here I pare down this eclectic experimental rumination to narrow my focus slightly on what might emerge when we perform a post-mortem autopsy on versions of a game that no longer exist. So with that, we come to Anna Anthopy's 2013 Queers in Love at the End of World, a game that needs no introduction. It's a classic of interactive fiction engaged by many, many queer game scholars, and it's no wonder. The Twine game recounts the last 10 seconds shared by the eponymous queers before the end of the world. The short and repeatable structure makes it extremely accessible, particularly in classrooms where students can play for free in a browser. It is also, of course, extremely compelling. The game opens at the conclusion. In the end, like you always said, it's just the two of you together. You have 10 seconds, but there's so much you want to do. So we choose. Kiss her, hold her, take her hand, tell her. Each decision takes us down winding paths we barely have time to read. Whether the lovers hold one another, finding shelter in each other's arms, comfort themselves with dark jokes, or desperately fuck, the ending is always the same. When 10 seconds are up, the branching paths are removed, and we are left with the message. Everything is wiped away. However, this dearly beloved game that's been documented, theorized, and taught so many times has died, just as the fictional lovers have. This is not to say that Queers in Love ceases to exist. I'm making no arguments about preservation here. You can visit Anna Anthopy's itch page and play it for yourself right now. It's also not to say that this is unique to Queers in Love. It's not, but I use it as a case study. Last year, I taught Queers in Love in my trans and queer games class, as I've done many times before. Class discussion drew from other scholars' work articulating how the small tweak of adding a timer to a conventional Twine game leads to a frantic, repetitive experience punctuated by moments of what Claudia Lowe calls respite, becoming a powerful meditation on queer life and death, how meaning is found in the quiet, ephemeral moments at the end when we are left lingering on the inevitable phrase, everything is wiped away. And then one of my students screamed, I found a glitch. She showed us how, when she pressed back in the internet browser, another timer appeared. We all turned to testing and found that pressing back sends the game to the previous page in the narrative while adding another timer, which can be repeated to stack timers concurrently. Playing like this gives us more time, but when any timer runs out, we're taken to the final page where everything is wiped away. It isn't, though. We can always press back again, and we can continue this infinitely. We can stave off the end, choosing to live forever in the unending apocalypse with our lover. This can't last. Eventually, time will get the better of us. However, our previous understandings must also be wiped away, or at the very least amended. In my class, we talked about glitches being a way for the game to speak to us in unexpected ways, and about the futility of holding on too tightly. The moments of respite Claudia Lowe dwells on are deferred. This is what Bo Ruberg calls permalife, the persistent state of living mere seconds away from dying. And it calls to mind P.S. Berge's invocation of unending play, which is an exercise in what lies at the boundary of the unplayable. This is a perverse afterlife, though. Instead of the game haunting us, we haunt the game, lingering in its passages long after we're welcome. The game becomes about hanging on, and how even cherished memories sour when we hold too tightly. We might be tempted to set this aside, though. Call it a glitch, oversight, unintended interaction. But to play normally has now become a choice. There's always the option to fight the inevitable. This also means that the game has always been something else. A reminder that any game is open to a similar unraveling, which in the longer chapter I connect to the practices of speedrunners and the ways that trans operates discursively in much queer theory. Trans reveals the choice, play, and constructedness of gender, yes, but even more threateningly, it reveals how things always have been otherwise. I've used the term glitch here to describe this mechanic, and following scholars such as Legacy Russell, Marquise Bay, Ari Gass, and Whitpow's lead, transsubjectivity. But I'm not sure that is accurate. Glitches are random and unexpected aberrations. This was the case when my student first discovered it, but glitches live on and change. Stacking timers has become a predictable mechanic open to the same manipulation and interpretation as any other. To label this a glitch is to place it outside of normal modes of interaction, and to sidelight it as paratextual is to fix the game in an imaginary, unchanging past. This, I argue, is an impulse to protect our own pasts and dearly held memories. Holding on to what we thought the game was is so much easier than altering both our present and past understandings. But a textual reading of this mechanic cautions against this. It cautions against suspending the past in a perpetual present, of denying its a movement, and of keeping a particular version of Queers in Love live long after repeated diegetic and technological deaths, of maintaining an unbroken link to the past. But no link is stable. I mean, that's the theme of the conference, yeah? And this is very literal in the case of Queers in Love. The game's afterword reads, "When we have each other, we have everything." Below this image is more text. You may remember that this link directs to a post on user Barely Real's Tumblr page with the image of a bathroom door with the phrase scrawled across it. But when you click it now, it still takes you to Barely Real's Tumblr, but the page is different. Now there's a mostly empty page with only one repost from a user named Slutty Little Savannah. I did some diving into archived versions of the Tumblr page and the game, checking the URLs and the metadata, and I determined that absolutely nothing about the game on a structural level has changed. It's always linked to this URL. The previous user simply deactivated their account and a new user, likely a bot, started using the same name. Barely Real is the one who changed, and through this change, the game has become something else. I linger on this broken link, connecting it to changing my name and online handles and the potential that exists in allowing links to rot, of allowing a dead name to become a dead link with something else occupying the old address. Technology tries to fix us in place, creating a stable identity to tie data to, but we don't necessarily adhere to those fixations. We might follow an old link we've clicked many times and have it return something else entirely. Janessa Hester points out that even though Anthropy continues to prolifically write, teach, and make games, critical engagement with Anthropy's work is largely constrained to the, quote, most canonical of her contributions to LGBTQ art, which is to say, Queers in Love and Dysphoria. Anthropy has been highly vocal about how treatments of her games have erased her continued lived experience by privileging empathy, a concern that she addressed in 2015 with the installation The Road to Empathy, featuring Empathy Game, which consisted of an old pair of her boots with a pedometer attached to them. For every mile visitors walked in the boots, they earned 1 point. The installation forefronts how playing games and using them as a teaching tool runs the risk of treating them as a substitute for engaging with the embodied experiences at their core. In the same way that Queers in Love becomes locked into a glitch-free interpretation, the trans designer disappears to the past, becoming a silent tool for the player's comfortable, safe growth. Facing potential homelessness in 2014, Anthropy started charging for access to Dysphoria, which had previously been available free on Newgrounds.com. And I should note, very recently she made it free to play again, which there's a lot to dig into, and I will in future iterations of this. But she writes on her blog in 2014, Dysphoria has been updated with an important new feature for players, the ability to actively contribute to the material well-being of a real-life trans woman. Poverty and homelessness, experiences that disproportionately affect trans people, rarely find their ways into discussions of games, but they haunt them nonetheless. And we continue to play what we imagine is the same game, linking us to an imagined person in the past while both continue to materially change many times over. Anthropy released Heat from Fire in 2021. It's a Twine game about trans feminine camgirl Malorca, who opens a portal to hell, which she uses to sex with the demon Asphodel. After flirting, Malorca summons Asphodel, leading to tentacle sex and them becoming girlfriends. But their future is uncertain, as Malorca's coven disapproves of her sex magic, labeling it chauvinistic and a violation of the boundaries of the natural world, and thus may send Asphodel back to hell. Malorca expresses her frustrations and anxieties about the bleak state of the world that has caused her to turn to dark magics, rampant income inequality, targeted racialized violence, climate disaster, all leading to what seems like the end of the world. We conclude Heat from Fire moments away from the end, of Malorca's relationship with the Coven, of Malorca and Asphodel's time together, of the world. But the ending we see in Heat from Fire are also the start of something new, the budding queer relationship they construct together. While holding each other, Mallorca tells Asphodel, everything in this fucked up world makes me feel powerless. I want to wake up to something nice for once. Is that super selfish? Do I get to be selfish at the end of the world? The original owner of the Barely Real handle made their last post to Tumblr on March 6, 2017. It was an image of three panels from Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' comic Watchmen. In it, the trans-temporal Dr. Manhattan, who there's a lot of very cool trans readings to be had of, says, I'm tired of this world, these people. I'm tired of being caught in the tangle of their lives. He then takes a photo of his former lover off a corkboard, and I'm taking the snapshot from its broken frame. Finally, he teleports away, leaving a wisp of smoke in the arid desert, and I'm gone. Posting these panels is a joke. The Tumblr user announces their departure in the melodramatic and overly self-important narration of a painfully serious comic book character. It's ridiculous, but it's funny in another way. While they don't know it, Barely Real does literally take their picture from the afterward and leave. We're left instead with slutty little Savannah and Queers in Love is Forever Changed. One line has always resonated with me in Watchmen that resonates with my readings of Queers in Love here too. The story culminates with the heroes unsuccessful in stopping the villain, Adrian Veidt, from completing his convoluted plan to end the Cold War by murdering millions of people and convincing everyone an alien did it. It's a wild story. With millions of deaths on his hands, looking to clear his conscience, Adrian asks Dr. Manhattan, I did the right thing, didn't I? It all worked out in the end. Dr. Manhattan responds, in the end, nothing ends, Adrian. Nothing ever ends. Nothing ends. Fragments of media live on long after their deaths, or we haunt the media long after we should have walked away. Other times, we fix media in place, establishing an end to its change, preventing its death, and forestalling new beginnings. I get my copy of Watchmen off the shelf to consult while writing. I haven't looked at it in years, and when I crack it open, multiple pieces of paper fall out. They're handmade Valentine cards and letters from my partner dated 2018. These notes, documenting a couple of queers in love at the end of the world, are a material trace of the care she showed me, the love that held me while refusing to fix me, pushing me instead past fixations, allowing me to change, and sustaining me so that I'm alive today to write this. And they're now part of the ephemera of Queers in Love. This is made possible because of the death of the game, of allowing the borders of technological systems to erode, which lets us not only play games, but play with games, changing what constitutes the proper object of game studies and media studies more broadly. That play inevitably leaves traces of lives, but nothing ends, nothing ever ends. The game continues on, becoming so much more when we allow it to decompose. This, I argue, is a trans orientation towards play and games, a playing amongst and with their disparate elements that expands the possibilities they represent. We find meaning in these surprising connections, and in being attentive to these moments, we create an ever-shifting archive of queer affect that remembers the past and allows new forms of embodiment and relationality in the present. Thank you.
Awesome. And I think that now's a great time. If you haven't already shared your love in the chat for all of our amazing presenters, please do so. Thank you so much, Madison.